Allie.
This is Madeline.
And welcome to our first and last episode of Movements Explained.
Today we'll be talking about the Mattachine Society, a gay rights movement.
Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started. What exactly was the Mattachine Society? Who was responsible for creating it?
Harry Hay formed the Mattachine Society in Los Angeles, California in 1950. It originally consisted of 7 gay men, however, over the years, its number of members grew significantly, including but not limited to people of different genders, sexualities, and races. Where did the name Mattachine Society come from?
The name came from the suggestion of James Gruber. It was inspired by the French Renaissance groups he had studied while preparing a course on the history of popular music. One of the groups was known as Société Mattachine.
They were a performing group that never performed unmasked. The group was dedicated to going out into the countryside, performing dances and rituals during the Feast of Fools.
Sometimes the rituals were peasant protests against oppression. So what were the hopes and goals of the movement? What were they aiming to do?
The Mattachine Society was a really cool movement, aiming for gender equality and equality in general, being able to be themselves and not be ashamed for who they are, building community, and supporting other minorities. Their statement of missions and purposes, created in 1951, stated that, quote, Mattachine holds it possible and desirable that a highly ethical homosexual culture emerge as a consequence of its work, paralleling the emerging cultures of our fellow minorities, the Negro, Mexican, and Jewish peoples, end quote. Additionally, they were fighting against common discrimination, unlawful arrest, harassment, inequality, and injustice. They accomplished this. Did they have strategies similar to other civil rights movements or completely different ones?
Well, when and after it was started in 1950, the Mattachine Society was only sponsoring discussion groups for lesbians and gay men to share their feelings and experiences. But later on, they eventually supported social events, fundraisers, newsletters, publications, and demonstrations.
In 1966, they started staging sit-ins, similar to the sit-ins that other movements staged at discriminatory bars all across the city of New York. They switched to political actions in 1952 when one of the original members was followed and harassed by a police officer.
The group challenged the case, hired a lawyer, raised money and funds, published and distributed newspapers, newsletters, and leaflets, and won the case. Inspired, they made even bigger strategies. In 1953, they started sending questions and questionnaires to political figures and candidates about where they stand with gay rights issues. What kind of issues, stereotypes, and harassment did they face?
Many were thought to be mentally ill, criminals, and were considered morally depraved. In the 1950s, being gay or being suspected of being gay could be a huge threat to your life.
Gay men were banned from serving in the military, from being on TV or in any entertainment, and could even be fired from their jobs for being suspected of being gay. Police violence was very common. Like we said previously, a well-known case that was actually won by the Mattachine Society involved Dale Jennings, an original member of the group who was followed and harassed by the Los Angeles Vice Squad. Were there any other issues that they faced? If so, how did they overcome it?
Well, sadly, another issue that affected them greatly was the group's activities being linked to communism. Most of the original members, including Harry Hay, were radical communists. An article that came out in 1953 about the Mattachine Society shed a negative light on the group, linking their activities to communism and scaring the members. To separate themselves and the movement from this, the founders resigned and turned the movement over to different leaders. Sadly, these leaders did not carry out the original founders' hopes and visions.
Additionally, not only were people fired on suspicion of gender and sexuality, but throughout the 1950s, countless people were arrested solely on charges related to their sexuality. And in most cases, these accusations led to losing their jobs, homes, and could harm them greatly.
In 1966 and by 1967, the Mattachine Society staged a sit-in at Julius in Greenwich Village. The bartender harassed them and denied them service, so they went to court on a bar discrimination suit. The New Jersey Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of the group. How has this carried into modern times? What are the lasting legacies of this movement?
The Mattachine Society taught people how to speak up for themselves, they gave them a voice, and they taught them leadership skills. The phrase, "you were not alone," certainly matched the movement, and they really built a community as well. They worked with other movements and organizations to define activism and help set people free from old traditions and norms.
Today, you see a collection of new voices, cultures, traditions, celebrations, and movements, which are only some results of this and other movements. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Movements Explained.
We hope you enjoyed us talking in your ear for 5 minutes.
We'll see you never on our next episode on the second Tuesday of next week, where I'll explain the Save the Bees movement.
Thank you for listening to this recording of Movements Explained. The following text is a works cited and whatnot. We use the Time magazine article, "What Was It Like to Be an LGBTQ+ Activist Before Stonewall?" as well as an essay from Found's SF essay collections. The title of the essay was Mattachine, Radical Roots of the Gay Movement. We also used an article from Britannica titled Henry Hay. This was recorded on June 3, 2021 at 2 hours 19 minutes and 37 seconds. Microphones and Apple voice memos were used to record this.